with the exception of the Eastern Cape, the only traditional leaders who understand that they are representatives of the people are the traditional leaders in the Eastern Cape.
The National House of Traditional Leaders to respond to this statement in a media briefing. Manhunt for last night's attempted cash and transit heist suspects continues. Commuters in Tsakane Brakpan in limbo as authorities remain tight-lipped about the reopening of the local taxi rank.
And in sports, surprise expressed as former Proteas captain AB de Villiers announces his retirement from all international cricket.
Well, the fastest 100 in the world of cricket.
Hello and welcome to SABC Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. Thank you very much for joining us this Thursday morning. Coming up this hour, we delve more into the recent cash heist. We get an update from the Hawks as well as an update from the taxi killings in Tsakane and Brakpan and essentially what the situation is on the ground. They're not alone. Valen Quitley is standing by with all your sporting highlights this morning. Very good morning to you, Valen. You well?
Very well, thank you, Shante.
Yeah, just quite sad about AB de Villiers and his resignation. I saw a lot of tweets on Twitter yesterday saying we do not accept his resignation.
I think after people saw what he was able to do with the Royal Challengers Bangalore in the Indian Premier League, they just couldn't wait to see him in the green and gold once again. And then I think lots of cricket fans, not only here at home but around the world, surprised that that will never ever be the case again. Shante, thank you so much. I'm glad to be with you and to bring you your sport. We're going to be looking at the AB de Villiers announcement that he is retiring and what some of the reaction has been. That and a lot more coming your way when it comes to your sport at 1:45 the top of the hour. First though, let's return to Shante for your news.
In your lead story at the top of the hour, the National House of Traditional Leaders will this morning respond to a statement made by a former president, Kgalema Motlanthe, on the weekend. Traditional leaders were angered by his comments in which he claimed they believe the land belongs to them, a claim he said had no historical basis.
What we heard from the public hearings were that with the exception of the Eastern Cape, the only traditional leaders who understand that they are representatives of the people are the traditional leaders in the Eastern Cape. They state up front that no, they don't own the land. The land is not their chattel property, it belongs to the people. Everywhere else, all the other provinces, the traditional leaders actually introduce themselves as the owners of the land to the exclusion of the people. Yeah, that's what they call themselves. Beng Mabu, that's what they say. Yeah, and they are greeted like that. So it has no historical basis. That relationship has no historical basis. The land belongs to the people. And that's what we must try and understand as this liberation movement, which has the responsibility to liberate our people from all the sufferings they had. I mean, you know, it's so painful that you have people who have lived on a piece of land for generations, and today they are being told they must take up leases. And when we sat down with the Ngonyama Trust Board, Judge Jerome Ngwenya and Dr. Madrop, they denied flatly. They said to us, no, the leases only apply to businesses. And yet the people gave us their forms. It's for residences. And the conditions are that you must fence off that piece of land within 6 months, failing which you will be evicted.
The Hawks in Gauteng have launched a manhunt for suspects involved in last night's attempted cash-in-transit heist. A Fidelity vehicle was attacked by a group of criminals on the N3 near Marlborough, north of Johannesburg. No money was taken. The incident comes amid a spate of cash robberies in the province in recent days. The South African Banking Risk Information Centre says there has been 140 cash-in-transit heists since the beginning of this year, with Gauteng topping the list at just fewer than 60 incidents.
Yet another crime scene, but this time the robbers were not so lucky. They forced this cash-in-transit vehicle to a halt on the N3, attempting a heist, but a shootout ensued. The suspect fled the scene empty-handed. A security guard was treated for minor injuries on the scene. The incident is the fifth in Gauteng in less than a week. On Sunday, an undisclosed amount of cash was robbed from a Fidelity van in Southdale. This just days after a brazen twin attack in Boksburg on Gauteng's East Rand. The South African Banking Risk Information Centre says there's been 56 robberies in Gauteng alone this year, the highest compared to the same time last year. It says it's working closely with police to try and curb the scourge. SABC News on the N3 freeway north of Johannesburg.
For more on this story, joining us now on the line is Hawks spokesperson Hangwani Mutlaudzi. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, are there any updates on that foiled attempt near Marlborough yesterday with regards to arrests possibly?
Well, good morning, Chantel, and good morning to the viewers as well. Well, in terms of that incident yesterday, the investigations are still continuing. Our firearms unit is busy probing that matter. Luckily, we did not have anyone who was injured during that attack. So it also falls within our mandate as part and parcel of the other cases that we're dealing with.
Now, there's been 56 heists in Gauteng alone since January this year. It's quite a staggering number and it's very alarming. What are some of the contributing factors possibly to the dramatic increase that we've seen in the heists?
Look, Shante, I think what people need to lead to is to know that there is a lot of issues. You know, it's a multiplicity of issues. You've got parolees that are out, that have been in jail for some time, and now they actually gone back to the same issue that they did before. These are people who were dealing with cash in transit. We've got former employees of these so-called security companies as well, who might have been fired from their work. Now they know the ins and outs of how the money is moved within these companies, and they give this information. Of course, the main issue here is issues of greed, you know, because if you can see these guys, they are very brazen. They don't care about the livelihoods of people. They do it, you know, in the afternoon. But it's issues that we're looking at. We're also dealing directly with the security companies as well. Issues of routes, you know, whether they should be able to look into these things, because you find that the same route are being used, so they become a sitting target. But in terms of that, we also doing our work in terms of making sure that those who are involved in these attacks, they are arrested. And if I can give you some of the statistics, so far we have arrested about 24 suspects. All of them, they are still in custody. They've been denied bail. There's a lot of firearms that we have also confiscated. These we're talking about high caliber firearms and the pistols, a lot of vehicles. Of course, there are still outstanding cases that we're still dealing with. And if I can also mention is that out of those suspects that we have arrested, some of them are connected to about 18 cases. There are other cases that we're also picking up that were never saw the light of, in court. These guys, they are, some of them have been linked to serious crimes like your murders, your car hijackings. So we are taking all these dockets and putting them into one basket, and also to try and ascertain as to why these cases did not see or did not go to court. So we're dealing with a highly sophisticated criminal, but at the same time, we are also making sure that we run after them. And I'm quite sure with these operations that we will be having as time moves, this kind of activity will also subside. And I think, as you would know, we will be having some sort of a summit, the Portfolio Committee on Police. They've called this summit where all the role players will be there. These are some of the things that we will also be presenting to them.
Just lastly, in terms of the syndicates, or rather the people that are involved in carrying out such incidents, reports are indicating that these incidents are being carried out with military precision. However, the Defence Minister has of course denied this, saying that the military should be ruled out. In having a look at how the the attacks have been staged, what are your views on this?
So look, in terms of these syndicates, you've got specialists. You've got specialists that drive, you've got specialists that do the bombing, you've got specialists that do the firing, and you've got the top ones who do the planning. So it's not your normal syndicates. People, some of them, they don't even know each other. So it's just a matter of us having to ascertain if there are any other people who might have military background. Yes, we do arrest people from outside of the country. It's difficult for us to be able to get into their profiles, but through the interventions of other law enforcement agencies or your crime intelligence or your state security, we can be able to get that. So we cannot say that the military is involved. There's no way. But the individuals, some of them, we can say that they could be having a background on the usage of firearms.
Indeed, we thank you very much for your time this morning. That was Hangwani Laudzi, Hawks spokesperson, just giving us updates that 24 suspects have been arrested. Of course, they have been denied bail. Also bringing into question a very, very important aspect. They're also noting that some of the people involved are former security guards that used to work for some of these companies. I'm also joined now on the phone by GCO from Fidelity Security Services, Will Bartman. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, what is the level of impact that the various heists that we've seen are taking on security companies?
Good morning. Yes, thank you for the time. It's huge. I think that if you look at the increase in the amount of attacks on our people and on our vehicle, it actually needs urgent attention as well as the attention of government to intervene.
Now, we've just spoken to Hawk spokesperson Hangwani Laudzi, and he's also, brought to the fore that possibly, in their investigations that they're seeing some of the syndicates that are implicated in this are former security guards that used to work for, for instance, the Fidelity services.
Well, we don't know exactly, and if they know who they are, the question is why don't they get arrested? We go through a proper employment process. We check and we make sure and try and keep our database clean. We do follow-ups, and yes, if services are terminated with us, we inform CIRA, and we try and prevent and keep them out of the industry.
Now, in terms of, the recent attacks that have been taking place on the guards, what contingency plans, if any, have the security services put forward at the moment?
Well, I think if you look at last night's incident, I think we were well prepared. We had our teams ready. We're deploying additional resources. Our chopper was in the air. And, we're spending a lot of money on technology and support for our staff on the road, and also looking at training. And the training, and then also working much more closely with the SAPs and the other services.
Essentially, what more needs to be done in terms of protecting the guards on the ground? specifically during this time?
Well, from our side, we do as much as possible. As I said, we deploy the additional resources. We provide backup teams. There's technology on the vehicle that we've deployed. We've picked up the early warning on last night's incident, and we could have reacted earlier to that. But as we've seen, is these teams are well organized. They have military precision that they come to, and they're well prepared in what they do. So we need the support of the SAPS and all governments, so that we can make sure that we can arrest and prevent these incidents, as well as convict these people, so that there's a deterrent and people will see that this is actually a very lucrative business currently for some of the criminals. And also, of course, the fact with the explosives are freely available, it's quite difficult to prevent and stop that currently.
In terms of the companies, of course, that the security services are working for, how essentially have they responded to what is happening? Of course, they're going to be affected financially.
Could you repeat that, please?
In terms of the companies that the Fidelity Security Services is working for in terms of transporting money, how essentially have they been affected? Have they given any response? Of course, they would be, significantly affected financially.
No, definitely, it's a huge impact. I think if you would, I think the other day I said that we spend in the region of at least 4 to 5 million on additional services to try and protect our staff. Also, we're upgrading all vehicles to try and secure and make sure that our staff is protected. And also to, as I said, we currently have 4 helicopters in all the different regions flying every day to try and support and get to our teams as soon as possible.
Definitely, we thank you very much.
So it's a huge financial impact. If you just look at the loss of the vehicles, it's more than $1 million on every vehicle that gets blown up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you very much for your time this morning. Of course, Wal Bartman from GCO of the Fidelity Security Services mentioning the security contingent that they've put over this time, as well as that continuous call to work in close collaboration with the SAPS, as well as talking about the financial constraint and impact that has had on the other companies. Let's have a look at some other news that has been making headlines this morning. Gauteng Transport MEC Ismail Vadi says he cannot guarantee the reopening of the local taxi rank in the Tsakane Brakpan area anytime soon. Well, the MEC ordered the immediate closure of the Tsakane taxi rank east of Johannesburg. This follows the murder of 4 taxi drivers yesterday. 6 others were wounded. Police arrested 8 security guards in connection with the shooting. About 10 firearms have also been recovered. MEC Vadi says the taxi rank will only be reopened after stakeholders in the taxi industry ensure an end to the violence. Indeed, for the latest on this, SABC's Crisalda Lewis is at the Duduza taxi rank, where Brakpan commuters are catching their taxis to different destinations this morning. A very good morning to you, Crisalda. Just give us essentially an update on the latest from where you are this morning.
Well, Shante, quite chaotic scenes here in this area in Tsakane this morning, when thousands of people try to find alternative transport to get to work. As you'd know, of course, as you pointed out, the MEC for Transport, Ismail Vadi, saying until the situation here does change and a sense of normality does return, the Tsakane taxi rank will remain closed. In fact, where I'm standing now is at the Duduza taxi rank, and this is where many of the commuters try to find that alternative transport to get to several areas, including the Johannesburg CBD where they work. And the lines were quite long here this morning, queues, snaking queues, many people trying to get onto the first taxi that they can out of this area to their respective destinations. Schooling also quite affected. Some people receiving SMSs saying that they should keep their children at home because they don't know what the situation is going to be like. And some of the parents also opting to walk their children to school because they believe that the area is not safe due to the ongoing violence in this area. But here at the Duduza taxi rank is where many of the commuters who were left stranded as a result of the closure of the Tsakane taxi rank try to come here and find some kind of transport to take them to their respective destinations. It's a bit quiet here now because many people have managed to get on the taxis to work. Many of them, I guess, are getting to work quite late this morning because of the challenges experienced in this area. What we do understand is that there will be some negotiations that will be held here with the respective taxi associations to try and bring a sense of calm to this area, because many of the commuters that we spoke to this morning indicated that they're quite scared to get on these taxis because of the ongoing violence. The incident that we saw yesterday, Shantae, was not the first incident. About 2 weeks ago, we saw another incident that left 2 security guards dead, as well as another official within the taxi industry. So really, the Gauteng Transport Department will have their hands full trying to resolve the situation here, because the areas that have been affected are here in Tsakane as well. Let's chat now to one of the taxi marshals in this area, Utato Wake Ntuli. Tata, please, can you come towards just this direction, please? Thank you very much. Tata, this morning, bebebaninzi abantu bebesiza ngapha bozokhangela itransport ukuya emsebenzini ngenxa ye taxi rank evaliweyo eTsakane.
Yebo kunjalo. Babaningi kakhulu. Sizamile ngakho kusemandleni ukuthi siba save ngendlela efanele. Noma bebe ngaphe kwethu kodwa sizame ngakho konke bafikile emsebenzini. Yebo.
Ningabashayeli betaxi la kule area tata mhlawumbi ke yan affecta nale situation ekhoyo apha malungana ne violence ekhoyo emateksini inihlupha kangakanani ni ngosomatekisini nonke nje?
Iyasihlupha phela ngoba kusho ukuthi njengathi nje siseceleni njengoba kuyinsakane ngezansi ithema ngenhla basuka kunsakane manje bagijimele kithi beze kithi ke manje usho sebebaningi over ngalo sikhathi yabona. Sizama ngokusemandleni ukuthi abathole in transport ziyobabeka lapha basebenzela khona. Okunzima kubo kakhulu kubuyele emuva ukuthi bangene eSakane sike zibadize thema bonke baweleke manje ukuthi bafika kanjani eSakane sibazi nathi manje ngoba kusondele kulula laba bantu abezwene kunzima ukuthi sisondele kibo nathi.
Nibona ingathi mhlawumbi lento ingasombululwa kanjani imeko yalana, because le taxi rank esikuyo ngoku ikwakufitshane nakule evaliweyo?
Isondelene kakhulu ma, sondele kakhulu phela, sondele kakhulu. Into engasiza mhlawumbe bona ugovernment mhlawumbe akayingenelele yena abone ukuthi engenza iphi isu kule ndlela okuyiyo yabona, ngoba thina sisodwa sehluleko ukwenza into right yabona. Ngcono nangena ugovernment kube uyena obukayo ukuthi njengoba kwenzeka kanje belwa kanje labantu yini engayenzi be right kuze ilunga le yanto lapha ngoba phela kulimala abantu ngale ndlela okuyiyo.
Siyabonga kakhulu Thato kwakhe Ntuli. Thato kwakhe Ntuli is a marshal here at the Duduza taxi rank here in this particular area, obviously calling for government to intervene in the situation here. But as it remains, this is one of the taxi ranks that's operational. The Tsakane taxi rank remains closed because of that violence. Back to you in studio.
Definitely, thank you very much. That was SABC's Crisaldo Lewis from Tsakane giving us an update from there. Moving on now, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has just announced the new changes with regards to the state-owned enterprise in his portfolio. In his budget vote last week, Gordhan unpacked measures that the department is taking to clean up and reform SOEs. For the latest, we go live to the minister's briefing.
Experienced business person. Mr. Sadiq is an accountant and also has some experience at Denel in his previous life. Ms. Rapkin has been an advisor to 3 successive ministers of defense and brings her wisdom and experience to the board. Dr. SABC is the former CEO of CSIR and currently Executive Director of the Wits Business School. So both science and business knowledge is what he will bring. Mr. Magazi, I think, is a lawyer. Dr. Nell is an engineer. And Ms. Leshloenia is an accountant as well. Now, each of these boards, some of whom I've met and some of whom I will now meet in their full form, are mandated to do, amongst other things, very clearly the following. They must undertake their duties diligently and ensure that the kind of fiduciary responsibilities that the Companies Act and the Memorandum of Incorporation and the Shareholder Compact imposes upon them is executed with absolute integrity. They must reinstill an ethical culture into state-owned entities. Clearly, we've lost a lot of ground in this particular regard. And the malfeasance that all of us know about and the consequences of state capture run quite deep. And once you have such a deep culture of malfeasance, it takes a tremendous effort on the part not just of the board, but of senior managers to get this process right. They must ensure good governance, accountability, and transparency. And here, what we want to introduce over a short period of time is that if there's, for example, a forensic report, it must be made public. So all of us know exactly what the forensic report said, whom have they found what evidence against, who must be further investigated, so that we don't have to make you work too hard to get leaks from anybody. You should be able to supply it to you on the table. And similarly, in the procurement area, we also want greater transparency and accountability. In some instances, it happens, and as you know, there have been major transactions running into hundreds of billions of rands at state-owned entities, which have very questionable processes. And excuse me. And these are things that should become matters of the past as we go along. We want to also try and encourage the right kind of relationship between boards and management. We've come across in interviewing board members of previous boards and a tendency to begin to assume operational responsibility. And sometimes it would appear it's to spend time at the entity so that they can earn more fees. Now, this is not what we want. If you're a board member, do your board work. If there is a necessity to intervene, let us know at the department and ministry, and we'll see how best to go about it. Of course, this is not, there are gray zones in this area, so we must actually understand that. They must investigate any allegations of corruption and ensure that where there's evidence of malfeasance, they deal with that evidence decisively. And where necessary, charges must be laid against individuals or entities that have benefited improperly from dubious procurement contracts with the Hawks and other sections of the police. Secondly, we expect that the prosecution authority will send out a positive and strong signal that they will act when there is the right amount of evidence prepared against individuals and entities that have been involved in malfeasance. But thirdly, the boards will also be asked to ensure that where funds are known to have left that particular entity, that those funds must be tracked down and brought back home. So recovering monies that have been lost is going to be an important function of these boards. But while they look at the past, in relation to corruption, they've also got to ensure in many of these entities that they have a keen understanding of what is happening financially. What's the cost base of the entity? What's the revenue potential and reality in each of these entities? And where are the operational efficiencies that are not being introduced, which could make a difference to the financial status of the entities themselves? We've also got to ensure that the companies do what they do in an effective and efficient way and in a financially sustainable way. And I think there needs to be a greater understanding amongst these entities that they are crucial to the South African economy in one way or the other. And that they must take responsibility for the kind of path that the President has set in terms of targets of growth, of job creation, and of inskilling people, of employing interns, and training young people in particular so that our economy has the right amount of skills, particularly in relation to the functions that these people are responsible for. The boards will also look at the executive management teams at each of these institutions As you know, over a period of time, state capture was also about not just replacing boards with appropriate people, that appropriate meaning appropriate to the state capture objective. It was also about removing good, honest managers and replacing them. And there are many instances of that in the SOEs that account to us. So the boards must look at the executive management teams and make sure that they are individuals with absolute integrity, good business and personal integrity and ethics, and are there to serve the public cause, because essentially these are all public servants at the end of the day. And finally, the job of the boards would be to ensure that they once again establish a good name for the particular entity that they operate in, both in respect of the employees, the stakeholders of those entities, people who lend money to those entities, and above all, the South African public. I think SOEs have earned a bad name for themselves over a period of time, and this is a wonderful opportunity for leaders who occupy positions on the board to shape the way in which not only how these entities operate, but how they're perceived by the public themselves. There are still two entities that we haven't got to yet. One is SAFCO, and the other is Alexco. And when we are ready, we'll make some announcements in that regard as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. We'll provide you with the profiles of the new board members. Okay, questions? Linda? Yes. And Paul? Yeah. We'll take the first round and then come back with the second round with 4 other people. Linda?
Thank you, Minister. Linda Insall, Business Day. Just 3 questions, if you don't mind. SA Express recently expressed an urgent need for cash, otherwise it's not going to be able to pay its suppliers. What's in the offing there? I mean, have you decided on any bailout? If you could clarify the commitment letter that you gave to SAA, what it contained and why it was necessary. And in your list of directors for SA Express, Ronald Lamola, I mean, as far as I know, he's a prominent ANC member. Was that the reason why he was appointed? Thanks.
Minister Jan Lange from Report. Yesterday's news about municipalities and last week's session about the debt of the municipal debt to Eskom, there was a decision by the Portfolio Committee, by Scopa, that an interministerial committee will be approached and to try and find a solution to this. I assume that you will probably be part of that interministerial committee. Can you give us an indication what are the options for this? Municipalities are more than 40% of Eskom's clients, buy more than 40% of their product, and they are clearly not able to repay their debt. Secondly, SA Express, is it still the intention to merge SA Express with SAA and Kalula and Mango? Does it make sense? Because wouldn't SA Express make the problems at SAE worse than it was? And is it the intention that SAA will come back to your portfolio?
Okay, Paul.
Good morning, Minister. Paul Vecchiota from Bloomberg. Just first of all, your predecessor in this position complained that it was very difficult to get people onto the boards because of the reputations of the state-owned companies. How difficult was it to get people, and are you satisfied you're getting the right types of people onto the boards now? Then secondly, what steps will be taken to reduce Eskom's risk to the fiscus? Doesn't necessarily mean reducing the risk, the debts, but the risk to the fiscus, which was identified as the immediate predecessor finance minister as the biggest risk to the country's fiscus. Thank you.
Donald. Minister. Yeah, Donald, go ahead.
Donald Presley from The Messenger. Minister, I've been around the block long enough to recall that some of the names associated with being chief executives and so on who are still in place went through quite a topsy-turvy phase some time ago. I have in mind Mr. Garma from Transnet. Are you going to be looking at these old issues again? And are there more people in your mind that need to be investigated in top positions in these state-owned enterprises? Are there more than? Are we going to be seeing more suspensions, prosecutions, and so forth? Can you give us a sort of an idea of the quantum of these?
Okay, thanks. Let the Minister respond, and I'll give you the second chance. Minister.
Thank you. SA Express, I think many of these entities are going to require, let's call it legitimate cash for operational purposes. And our, I think, experience and understanding is that if you have the right boards with the right kind of experience and insights, but also the courage and the boldness to do the right things, plus an effective management team, many of these entities can, and SA Express certainly as well, pull themselves out of the trouble that they find themselves in. Why do I say that? The entities like SA Express find themselves where they are because of the fact that the focus became the question, how can I steal? Right? Rather than how can I make this airline run properly? And once you begin to lose your focus, and if the intent is extraction for yourself, for your friends, for businesses that you are associated with, for earning kickbacks from deals that you actually make, then obviously you're going to find yourselves in trouble because your focus is not how to get the business right. So there's, I think if I cross over to the other question as well, we currently might have a situation where SA Express, Mango, and SAA all fly to the same destination. Bringing the airlines together and rationalizing their routes, and more importantly, rationalizing the kind of aircraft needed at a particular time in day, of day. So if traffic is thin, so to speak, at midday, why use a big aircraft? Use a smaller aircraft. And that's the experience from that we are beginning to learn from airlines around the world. Different gauge aircrafts for different destinations at different times of the day. So it's that synergy and savings, and there will be other areas of rationalization as well. So our net guess is that by putting the airlines together, we can actually go through a transition period where there are going to be difficulties. And I think more recently there have been some good pieces written by your constituency, understanding the reality that closing down something is far more expensive than operating it and taking it into a more survivalistic mode and then more successful mode at a later point in time. Secondly, if you have something that's dysfunctional and you want to try and sell it, you're going to get very little for it. So the real challenge, I think, for us is putting the right people in the right places, both on boards and management teams, both at a business level and technical level, and having the right oversight and accountability over them so that we know that they're actually doing the right things. It also means that in the department, we need the technical capability to understand what all these entities are doing. And that's another process that we are involved in at the moment. So I wouldn't see this as a bailout, but there are talks with the Treasury to get some short-term cash. I mean, if you need to buy tires, you need to buy tires. And if you don't have the cash at the moment, then you need a bit of cash facility so that you can get aeroplanes off the ground. And if you do, you'll earn revenue. And if you earn a reputation, again, for punctuality and serving the secondary cities and other less popular routes in South Africa well, you'll draw customers again, and that begins a virtuous cycle as we go forward. SAA is not with us at the moment, Linda, so there was no commitment letter from me to SAA, probably from Minister Nene. So I told you it's early in the morning. I told you it's early in the morning. Now, Mr. Lamola has been chosen because he's been practicing corporate law for the last 10 years. He runs his own company. He's got a master's in corporate law and I think another master's as well. So he's not somebody who's not a professional. And what we've done in many of the boards, on all the boards, is try to get a gender balance right, try to get the balance between experienced and younger people right, give new opportunities to young professionals, lawyers, accountants, engineers, so that another generation of board members can actually learn from the more experienced ones and ensure that we have enough people there with the right integrity and leadership to steer entities and those boards and management teams in the right kind of direction. So that's the broad objective that we've tried to accomplish. Jan, on the municipal debt issue, I think it's going to take us some time to unravel the spaghetti, but amongst the things that we need to look at, which we will do shortly more intensely, because otherwise you get into this tangle which says you owe us pay, and the other response will be we can't pay, we don't have money. And then you get locked into a gridlock that you can't get out of. So in the first instance, we've got to look at whether municipalities have the right collection capability. Secondly, what's the compliance culture in various communities? In other words, the willingness to pay. Thirdly, what is the relationship between Eskom and the municipalities? So there are some odd practices that have crept in over time, where, for example, it appears they have a ceiling for each municipality and area in terms of the amount of power that they think that municipality will draw at the maximum. And if you go past the maximum, for whatever reason, you attract a penalty. But that penalty, if you go past that maximum for 1 hour, I think the penalty is for 4 months, 6 months. Right, so 1 hour equals 6 months. Now, that can't be fair. So we want to look at the pricing policy of Eskom as well and ask the board to do that more carefully and unravel all of these different elements. And at the end of the day, once we get some of the technical aspects right, it's going to be about political will. Are we going to start engaging with communities, which we should, to explain how electricity works and its pricing works and how the sustainability of institutions like Eskom works? So I think we have a reasonable grasp of the issues. We must now get down to not just the talking, but making some moves to cut, that's an unfortunate pun, but the Gordian knot, and so that we can start a process of transformation around municipalities themselves. I've answered the merger point. SAA coming back to DPE, we anticipate that it would. I think it's a question of timing. Paul, difficult to get people on the board? Right now, no. You can see the kind of people that have made themselves available. And I think if we now look at the responses to the advert that we've placed so that we can scrap the old database and create a new one, we get Tumamina offers like literally every day. The question is, where do we fit people in? And how do we use the kind of skills and experience that they actually come with? And the President yesterday repeated that call to all South Africans. How do we share skills and how do we help each other to build South Africa and take it in the right direction? Clearly, if there are reputational issues, nobody wants to be associated with badly run entities or entities that have got themselves into difficulties. So it's very understandable if somebody else had problems in this regard in the past. I'm sure you're not surprised either. Reduce Eskom's risk to the fiscus, I think that's the overall objective. And that's the work in progress. And perhaps in the next, say, 2 months, the board would have had enough time to look into some of these issues, as would we and government more generally. And our aim is certainly to reduce Eskom as a risk and turn Eskom into an asset as far as both the fiscus is concerned. There was a time when Eskom paid big amounts in tax, which I hope it still does. I'm no longer the taxman, so I don't know. But also, many of these entities used to pay dividends to the state as well. And I think that's an important point to get to from its commercial activities. Donald? No, the boards must look at whatever they need to look at. And so, across the board, as I indicated earlier on, the boards have, if you like, 3 broad sets of functions. The first is to clean up the past. So investigate what needs to be investigated, pursue charges if they are necessary and legitimate, and clear people out of the system that are going to be toxic in these institutions. The second is to stabilize the institution, both in governance terms, in financial terms, and in terms of the morale of the staff and management in these institutions. The third is to look into the future and say, how are we going, where do we want to position these institutions as we go into the next 5 to 10 years? For example, the energy terrain is changing every day. Right? There are people getting off the grid, on the grid, starting their own grids and what have you. Now, if you remain static on the basis of a view developed 5 years ago, then you'll run, like any other business, you'll run into trouble. So if you want an example, maybe 10 years ago, all of you used Nokia phones, right? Nokia has virtually disappeared, except for the small burner phones that they now market. And the question is why? All of you used to be proud Kodak users. That's gone as well. Motorola, that's gone as well. So those are very good business examples of the kind of stuff that people have to actually deal with as we go forward. So those are the 3 core tasks that these entities and their boards and management teams have to look at.
Okay, thanks, Minister. Can I, last page. Pretoria, any question, Ismail?
Thanks, Chairperson. Yes, we do have a question from Pretoria.
Okay, go ahead.
It's Terence Creamer, Engineering News. Thanks, Minister. Just on what we've learned over the last few years is that people matter, and the new people at these boards are going to matter very much. How have you vetted these people in such a short time? And what safeguards have you got in place if you find that maybe you've chosen the wrong people? And I did one name that didn't seem to come up was Alana Kinsley from the Transnet board. If you could just confirm whether that name is still on the board. And then the President made an announcement around the President SOE Council. And I was wondering if you could just talk about how the relationship is going to work between the Council, the boards, your department, the executives, and how you see that transitioning to some sort of governance end state for state-owned companies, and what that end state could look like. And then besides Mr. Gadebe's name on the Eskom list, I think the name was also put forward for CFO of Eskom. Was that considered, or was that a board competence? And then just on Eskom again, and on the 3 imperatives, clean up, stabilize, and look to the future. On looking to the future, how much leeway have you given the Eskom board and executives in terms of looking to that future with the corporate plan coming up in September? You mentioned the changes that are taking place in that environment of energy, but also in terms of asset sales or the radical restructuring of Eskom, whether it's going to be just a cleaning up of what we have, or whether we can envisage something more dramatic in terms of the structure of Eskom. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Pretoria. Let me start with Hajra, and then you come.
Thank you. Hajra Marji from Power 987. Minister, you said on struggling SOEs, closing them down something is more expensive than survival or building a more successful entity. Now, in that regard, the President yesterday spoke about looking at accountability as well as the liquidity of some SOEs. Where is the debate right now? Is it possibly selling off non-strategic assets in SOEs, or is it looking at a shareholder model where perhaps government still owns 51%, but you sell off a percentage? Can you give us more detail on that? And then also on the issue around how these SOEs will be governed. I think it was before the Davos meeting where Ramaphosa, he was dealing with the Eskom matter at the time, and he said he doesn't believe the shareholder needs to manage SOEs, but simply play an oversight role. So what will government's relationship be with the boards, and what will the board's relationship be with the management? I hope I make sense.
Okay, Lamise from Fin24. Part of the mandate for the boards is to investigate allegations of corruption and then take action or recover the monies. So just regarding Eskom, those that resigned, if it is found through the investigations that those people are implicated, will action be taken against them? Against those at Eskom who have resigned?
The last one, yes.
Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News. Minister, last week your department placed an advert calling on people to apply to be members of the boards. Is that for the boards that you still mentioned, or for the companies that you've mentioned that still require boards, or are you hoping to create some type of database of people that you can draw from when you need to?
Okay. Minister, you can go ahead.
No, thank you. I didn't know there was somebody called Pretoria in Pretoria.
It was Terence Kramer.
Terence, okay. Yeah. You're absolutely right, Terence, that people matter. And sometimes you have instances where, for a particular period of time, somebody might appear to be absolutely clean, with integrity, and suddenly there's a twist in the tail, as we're learning over the last few years. So human beings have their fragility as well. So the mechanism that we have is that of a special general meeting in terms of the Companies Act, and Section 71 of the Companies Act entitles us to, as a shareholder, call into question any board member if we have sufficient proof of malfeasance or impropriety or whatever the case might be. But also that section requires us to hear people out. And you asked about some of the other names earlier on. So we have meticulously listened to people who were on the previous board, given them an opportunity to state their case, considered very carefully what their case was, if they wanted to remain, if they wanted to resign, well, that was a different matter, which was the case with Ms. Kinley. And then we decide what kind of mix of skills we need, which I spelt out earlier on, and do a search of our own from the old database, but also by talking to different types of organizations. And that's the mix that we have at the moment. So the Companies Act allows us to review the boards, and in any event, if you like, the contract between the board member that is appointed and government, or the shareholder, is that you are appointed for 3 years, subject to an annual review. So that's part of the conditionality that's actually built in. So if there's anything extraordinary, there are legal mechanisms. These are not arbitrary. These are legal mechanisms to ensure that we can get the right thing done. On Ms. Kinley, she decided not to continue, so that's why her name doesn't appear. On the SOE Council, and that's linked to Hajra's point as well, that's something that the President announced yesterday. I think he will give the public and yourselves a better feel once he has an opportunity, perhaps this afternoon when he responds to the debate on his budget vote. But let's wait for some clarity from his side or from the later briefing that you would get from Cabinet. It's not my place to speak on behalf of him or Cabinet in that particular regard. Mr. Hadebe and CFO, well, the board considered a set of names. There were initially, I think, over 200 and something applicants or names that they had before them. They narrowed it down to a number, and then they interviewed people, and they then came up with the suggestion which we've just announced. And the CFO position is also under consideration by the board at Eskom itself. Does Eskom have the leeway to do what it wants to do? I think in the first instance, remember that Eskom is an implementer of policy that is developed by the Department of Energy and adopted by government. That policy is articulated in the Integrated Resource Plan. A new Integrated Resource Plan is due sometime soon, as Minister Hadebe, the Minister of Energy, has announced. And it is in that context that Eskom will then look at what it does and what its role is, and the board will then determine how Eskom is to implement the decisions that government makes in that regard. Secondly, in looking at the operating model or the business model of each of these entities, clearly the boards will have to review whether structures actually match strategy and the objectives that we've actually set for ourselves. And if there is a need to review some of these elements, there is a government policy, I think, adopted in about 2016 and recommended by the Presidential Review Committee.
And just coming out of Parliament there, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan announcing some of the changes that he's made to board, specifically with the state-owned enterprises in his portfolio. Also announcing Eskom's new CEO, Bakamani Hadebe. Of course, he has been an acting CEO, has now been confirmed. Also, the likes of Ronald Ramola also being brought into SA Express and the board member. We now cross as President Cyril Ramaphosa is currently delivering the Nelson Mandela Africa Day Centenary Lecture in Durban. We cross over live to the proceedings.
Arts and culture, education, youth sports and recreational activities, health, security and protection, governance, human settlements and social development. We are currently exploring similar agreements with provinces in the rest of Africa, particularly those with which we share developmental trajectories, but also similar patterns of economic exclusion and poverty. We will continue to identify several opportunities for economic cooperation and sharing best practices regarding the resolution of socio-economic development issues, the creation of jobs and addressing inequality. We will continue developing our own industrial capacity, agro-processing, beneficiation of what mineral products we have, exploring science and technology, as well as infrastructure development opportunities. Program Director is KwaZulu-Natal. One of our major natural advantages is finding ourselves on the Indian Ocean Rim. For this reason, we potentially have access to the abundant resources of the ocean, including fisheries, offshore oil and gas, tourism and maritime industries. Between them, our ports of Durban and High Reaches Bay Harbour handle over 60% of the country's seaborne cargo. In spite of this, our maritime industry is characterized by significantly low levels of participation by the majority people in this province. We believe that unexplored as it is, the ocean's economy in all its variations presents one of the greatest opportunities for economic growth and development of our province and country. By the same token, if planned properly, this industry holds untold opportunities for the economic inclusion of the majority to the mainstream economy. We are hopeful that the Blue Ocean's economy, coupled with a national policy shift towards the use of gas, will also boost our national and provincial economy. Program Director, our ports are also natural sites for growth in sectors such as shipbuilding and repair, and oil and gas support. We have no doubt that when oil rigs start visiting our coastline on a regular basis, this industry will grow exponentially. As we stated during the State of the Province address, we stand ready to take advantage of these and other new opportunities and a chance to redirect and recharge our economic growth. We, however, cannot ignore some worrying trends which, if left unattended, have the potential to derail the working relationship with our social partners and neighbors, as well as our march to economic growth. Recently, organized business in KwaZulu-Natal expressed alarm at what they call the escalation of uncertainty linked to the following recent events. The banning of trucks on the N3 from Moy River Tollgate, which disrupted traffic and affected a number of sectors. Construction sites, invasions, extortions, and rising tensions in townships among local traders. Attack at the mosque in Verulam, and political killings that are occurring in our province. As a provincial government, we consider these and similar incidents in a very serious light. Although we are still going to meet with the business sector, and we do have plans scheduled for that, but I do want to share here on this platform that in this regard, during SOPA, we committed to hold a series of stakeholder engagements with a cross-section of the KwaZulu-Natal community. These engagements were identified, amongst others, sectors such as faith-based organizations, traditional leaders, and business. To this end, we will, within 30 days, convene a meeting of strategic stakeholders in the business sector. We are keen to hear from organized business and our social partners who are organized, labor and civil society on the growth and development of the economy. With regard to political violence, I can also confirm that we are expecting the report of the Moirane Commission into political killings by the end of this month. As you may be aware, the President has also instructed an interministerial team of the security cluster to urgently look at political killings in the province. Mr. President, we applaud you for your leadership on this matter, and we will provide all the necessary support as work is being done in this regard. With regards to calls by the Northern Region Business Association to shut down spazas owned by fellow African migrants, as government we have made it very clear that the law must be kept at all times. At a meeting held on 15th May in Kwamashu, we established a task team made up of all sides to update the database of spazas in the Inanda Ntuzuma Kwamashu area with a view to identifying illegal ones. We agreed that no individual or group has a right to shut down any business. We also agreed that all unregistered spazas will be closed down following a legal process led by the City of eThekwini. However, we want to introduce a system of regulations which will ensure that there is order in the operations of these mini shops. We will not allow uncontrolled mushrooming of the spaza shop again in eThekwini. This is because we have identified this as the primary factor causing tension between South African-born traders on one side and the Somalis and Ethiopians in particular on the other side. I must reassure all and sundry that this conflict has nothing to do with xenophobia, but is a struggle over limited resources in the townships and the limited market. Importantly, we intend assisting the sector with sustained support and ranging from training to finance. We have also agreed in the long term to examine complaints about the negative impact of malls on local businesses. We are in the meantime, through economic development, tourism and environmental affairs, piloting a revolving loan project and will soon finalize a bulk buying support program for small businesses. On 24th May, which is today, will be we are supposed to have updated all our progress in this matter. But yesterday, I'm aware that the MEC for Economic Development already held a meeting with the warring parties in that area. We wish to urge all sides to exercise restraint and to allow us to address the issues that have been raised during recent consultations. Concerning blockading of the N3 toll plaza, we have convened an urgent meeting with the truck operators and will soon be meeting with the drivers. We have identified the issue as relating to the employment of foreign drivers. While we discuss the matters with the relevant departments, including Labour Department, we have now focused our security cluster on the N3 corridor and are engaging the local community to ensure that the past events are not repeated. No roads must be blockaded or property banned just because there are grievances of any kind. Program Director, I've used this platform to provide some update and to assure you and the people of KwaZulu-Natal we cannot afford the undermining of our economic growth plans, as these incidents are threatening to do so. This includes invasions and extortions that are carried out throughout the city by a group demanding empowerment and inclusion in major projects. We will not allow any incursions into infrastructure development projects in our province for any reason. As the MEC for HR has indicated before, we have established structures for engagement with business and stakeholders, and we would like this to take precedence. While we are generally in agreement that transformation must take place, this must never disturb the smooth functioning of our economy. We are therefore, as we engage with the business sector, listen to their concerns, listen to their views on solutions, but also together find the best way of ensuring that there is stability, which we should all together work towards, but also together make sure that there are new and innovative ways of how economic transformation will be executed. Program Director, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, my major task this morning was merely to set the scene for His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Africa, Mr. Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa, to address this gathering. And I now need not wait further and waste more time, seeing that none of us do not understand the biography of Mr. Ramaphosa anymore. If you don't, I'm sorry, but you can go through some of the important pages in your IT. You'll find it. The President is on the rush. Let's allow him space to address all of us. I ask, therefore, that you all stand to welcome to the podium His Excellency Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, who I now have the pleasure to call to this platform. Your Excellency.
Thank you, thank you. Let us be seated. Program Director, the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Willis Mkhunu, the MEC of Economic Development and Tourism, Mr. Sihle Zikalala, the founder and originator of this lecture series 20 years ago, who is still here with us, who we applaud and thank for having initiated this. Let's give him a round of applause. The Vice Chair of African Renaissance, Professor Ngubane, the Deputy Mayor of our city, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank the African Renaissance Trust for this invitation to once again participate in this celebration of Africa Day this year, in the year in which we also mark a very important occasion, the centenaries of two very notable Africans, Utatu Nelson Mandela and Mama Albertina Sisulu. These are Africans who, at a different time in history, particularly the history of our continent, bequeathed to us values and behaviors that stand us in good stead in the 21st century. Both Tata Mandela and Mama Sisulu dedicated their lives to securing better social and economic conditions for all the people of our country and indeed of our continent as well. Just a few days ago, I was very honored to be near here in Amanzimtoti to interact with a global industrial company and a group of highly skilled and productive young South Africans in this province. They are both living proof of how our social and economic landscape is changing for the better. My visit to the South Coast took me to the Volvo truck factory, and I was accompanied by MEC Zigalala, where Volvo has firmly placed its confidence and its capital in South Africa as a vibrant, productive, and predictable investment destination. Sensitive to the need for us to promote manual work in the midst of the unstoppable march of automation, Volvo continues to invest in providing skills to its energetic team of assembly workers. Between them, these impressive young people turn the key on a new Volvo truck every 45 minutes, producing up to 10 a day, every day that they work. And they are now going to up it to 12 a day, thanks to the skills, sound working conditions, and motivation with which they have been empowered. These young workers have not only become self-sufficient individually themselves, but the material support they provide to their families means that purchasing power and personal pride and dignity are living side by side in neighborhoods around Amanzimtoti. I tell this story because it illustrates that the achievement of the African Union's Vision 2063 relies on seemingly isolated and desperate stories that are unfolding from Amanzimtoti to Abidjan, to Algiers, to Addis Ababa, to Kigali, to Nairobi, to Bujumbura, and many other places. Yet, instead of being isolated and desperate, these examples of great progress are in fact part of a rich tapestry of social and economic transformation that collectively produce a composite image of a continent on the rise. Whereas a few years ago, the magazine Economist saw fit to put on its cover a story of an Africa that is failing, which they dubbed their hopeless continent. A number of years later, those cover stories have changed, and they have said Africa is on the rise. It is therefore with a sense of hope and optimism that we find inspiration in the transformation that is sweeping across our continent in waves of varying intensity and size. These waves of development and transformation are constantly reshaping the shoreline of underdevelopment and disadvantage that used to characterize life on our continent. Hopelessness and despair are being eroded by the expansion of education and entrepreneurship on our continent and the advancing empowerment of women in African societies and communities. In March this year, the AU Summit in Kigali, Rwanda, reached the historic milestone of an agreement on the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. This agreement seeks to dissolve barriers between countries to shared opportunity and prosperity by enabling the movement of people, goods, services, and knowledge around our continent. This agreement places the best that Africa has to offer at the disposal of all Africans and promises to reduce the inequality that has dogged our continent across national borders for a very long time. Poverty and underdevelopment often exists just a few kilometers away from prosperity and progress. The agreement on an African continental free trade area took place in a continent far removed from the Africa in which Pixley Kaisa Kaseme penned his 1906 essay titled The Regeneration of Africa. Seme called for the people in the land to unite and see the continent as equal in its contribution to civilization. His generation understood that the responsibility that rested on their shoulders to restore the dignity of the African people was quite immense. They challenged the Eurocentric stereotypes of Africa as a dark continent. It was our forebears, especially those who had early contacts with their diaspora counterparts studying overseas, who exchanged ideas of how to confront colonial oppression. In the interconnected world of today, where we as Africans are set ourselves as equals, not subjects, in the global governance system and the globalized economy, we are able to sustain the thinking and work pioneered by Pixley Kaisa Kaseme. Our current task is to shape the progressive and prosperous Africa we want and the one we wish to bequeath to future generations. This future must be the outcome of a shared vision in the same way that our dismantling of the shackles of oppression and colonialism relied on solidarity and unity in resistance. Therefore, in 2018, we continue to be guided and also to be inspired by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Murtala Mohammed of Nigeria, Patrice Lumumba of Congo, Amilcar Cabral of Guinea-Bissau. We were also guided by Agostinho Neto of Angola, Eduardo Mondlane of Mozambique, Seretse Khama of Botswana, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Martin Luther King of the United States. Yes, Marcus Garvey of Jamaica, and our own Albert Luthuli and Nelson Mandela. They continue to be the spirits that guide us. We remain inspired by the words of Madiba when he said, "I dream of the realization of the unity of Africa, whereby its leaders combine in their efforts to solve the problems of this continent." The realization of Madiba's dream rests on leaders from all sectors of our society, leaders in government, business, labor, community, civil society, and large and across the continent. This dream that Madiba had, a dream of unity, was not only for Africa, but it was also for our own country. It was also a dream for our own very province here. If Madiba were alive today, he would say, "I dream of the realization of unity of our people here in KZN." He would have spoken very vocally and loudly and said some of the expressions of either disagreement that manifest themselves in the killing of other people that we disagree with must come to an end. Madiba would have said, unity should be underpinned by dialogue. Unity should be underpinned by consensus building. And that rather than resort to means where we kill each other, we should rather be sitting down and having discussions to build this unity that we also so need here in KZN. Madiba would have said, the killings of one another must come to an end. And so I say here today, the killings that have been taking place in this province must come to an end. It is indeed when we find a way of sitting down and discussing what makes us differ that we are able to find peace, that we are able to find a way in which we can develop our province and indeed our country. That is what was Madiba's dream. We are also guided by the central guiding vision crafted by our continent dubbed Agenda 2063, which is the AU vision of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in international arena. This is a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the next 50 years. It builds on and seeks to accelerate the implementation of past and existing continental initiatives for the growth and sustainable development of our continent. In seeking to fulfill this vision, in our own instance as South Africa, we are taking steps to implement a number of policies a number of policies that will make our own country be part of this development that is unfolding on our continent, so that by 2063, we are able to look back and say, yes, we played our part in developing our continent. And in our case, we want to look forward to 2030 and say, through our National Development Plan, we've been able to take important strides to develop our country. Right now, we are putting the building blocks in place, and in a number of places, the buildings are already going up. Having inherited a past that we are not proud of, we have had to embark and adopt policies that are going to rapidly advance the interests of our people. And one of those is to radically change the economic architecture of our country through our policy of radical economic transformation, which is aimed at transforming an economy that remains largely characterized by the structural flaws of a racist and patriarchal past. Our policy of radical economic transformation is also based on the imperative that as a country we should find ways of utilizing the resources of our country to full effect. This we have to do because the apartheid system designed the economy of our country, and indeed everything else in our country, in a way where the resources were just utilized to serve the interests of a minority. You come to the capital investment in our country, it was not fully exploited, it was utilized just to serve the interests of a minority. You come to human resources, the human resources of the majority of our people were blunted because they sought just to advance the resources of a small minority. You come to the most important resource in any country, land. Land also was utilized in a way as to advance the interests of a minority. Where do you find a situation where 87% of the land of a country is just set aside for less than even 10% of a population, and the majority is allocated 13%? This is what we have had to deal with, and this is what we have decided we are going to deal with, so that we utilize the full resources of our country to advance the interests of our people. That is why the question of land, therefore, has to be dealt with. We have to distribute land to our people through a process of expropriating that land and distributing it to the majority of our people. This is what we believe our forebears would have been pleased with. This is what we believe our forebears would have been proud of. To know that, yes, the resources of our country, of our continent, are being exploited to the hilt and are being used to advance the interests of all our people and not just a minority. As we noted in Parliament yesterday, millions of our people remain outside of the productive economic activity, and they are unable to contribute, they are also unable to benefit. This is so because they were locked out of the ability to contribute meaningfully. Like elsewhere on the continent, the majority of these people are young. They live far from the economic centers. They do not have the skills work experience or networks to find gainful employment, and they do not have the assets or the markets they need to start their own enterprises. This is the environment in which we look to collectives such as the KZN Growth Coalition, the Durban Chamber of Commerce, and the African Renaissance Trust to develop solutions and opportunities that will help us overcome the lingering poverty, unemployment, and inequality that face many people in this province and elsewhere. Working together with our provincial government, we should be able to tackle all these problems. We look to the collective leadership of this province to explore ways of giving effect to the new social compact around job creation that we are seeking to build among labor, business, and communities nationally. As leaders in this province, you are best placed to bring this effort to secure growth and development and transformation to the people of KwaZulu-Natal. As we build and move towards a national job summit, government, business, and labor and community in KwaZulu-Natal do have an opportunity to investigate how and where sustainable jobs and skills development can be implemented in this province. The experience of Volvo Trucks and its staff is a powerful example amongst many of what can be achieved and should be sustained as we set out on an ambitious drive to attract investment of $100 billion in our economy over the next 5 years. I was overjoyed when I met our mayor here, our Metro Mayor, my dear sister, and she said to me, President, I want to join your investment envoys and travel around the world and go campaign for quite a lot of this investment to come here to eThekwini. And I said, no, I want some of it to go to the rest of the province. And she said to me, but Mr. President, just cut me a little bit more so that it can come here to eThekwini. Then I realized that we've got a mayor who is looking forward and who is enthusiastic about generating investments for eThekwini. And as my comrade Sihle Zigalala will tell you, he wants quite a lot of that $100 billion that we are going to raise to come here to KwaZulu-Natal. Now, these are examples that we wish to see replicated not just around eThekwini, not just around KZN, but throughout our country as well, and finally throughout the continent. Our own new dawn is part of a broader continental dawn of shared growth and prosperity, in which South Africa retains its position as a gateway to Pan-African opportunity for the peoples of this continent and our international partners. South Africa's own growth stands to benefit significantly from and contribute to the rising tide of development in our region and our continent. This rising tide entails political and economic cooperation with outcomes that include greater integration and the development of regional infrastructure, the development of services and knowledge bases that equitably benefit all member states in our continent. Investors and innovators must be made to feel at home here in Africa. They must be made to feel that this is a continent that they can come and safely invest their money in. We must be inspired by our ancestors whose boundless creativity and majestic works endure till today. The magnificent pyramids of Egypt, the sculptures of ancient kingdoms of Ghana and Mali and Benin, the temples of Ethiopia, and the rock paintings of the Kalahari all speak volumes about Africa's innovation and contribution to human development. Increasingly, these representations of African civilization are being supplemented by advanced infrastructure, industrial parks, scientific laboratories, and corporate tower blocks that mark our continent's urban landscape. The engineers and artists of ancient times have worthy successors in a new generation of young scientists, technicians, financiers, coders, and designers. Our task is to create the conditions for this new generation to grow and to thrive and to build a continent of hope and progress. This hope and progress one sees emerging in many parts of our continent, testifying to this regeneration of Africa that was foreseen by Pixley Kaisa Kaseme. You go through many countries of our continent. In agriculture, you go to countries such as Ethiopia, countries that were dogged by famine a few years ago. They've now become centers of excellence when it comes to agriculture. Agricultural revolutions are emerging in a number of environments on the African continent. Technological prowess is just spreading throughout the continent. Our own leadership through the SKA that we have in the Karoo is testimony that indeed Africa, freed of the shackles of colonialism, freed of the shackles of apartheid misrule, can rise to the challenge. And indeed, in many ways, we are rising to the challenge. And Africa's time indeed has arrived. The key question is, have we arrived to take advantage of Africa's time? We must constantly remind all these wonderful scientists, all these wonderful workers on our continent. We need to constantly remind them of Madiba's words, who said, "Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that generation. Let your greatness blossom. It is then that the brighter day of which Pixley Kaisa Kaseme spoke that will rise upon the African continent. It is then that our chains will be dissolved, our plains will be red with harvest, and our crowded cities will send forth the hum of business. This is the Africa whose future is being seen, is being foretold also by our leaders. I want to conclude by saying, for me, as a new president, attending the African Union summits, it is actually quite a joy to see how African leaders across many countries have taken or are taking the development of our continent seriously, Whoever you talk to talks about the economic development, and not only of their own country, but of various countries in Africa. We've got a new generation of leaders on our continent who are focusing on how we can develop the people of our continent and how we can enhance the resources so that those resources can lead to economic development that will lead to the betterment of the lives of our people. Indeed, Africa is on the rise. The question is, are we going to be able to rise to the occasion and make sure that the African Renaissance that we have always spoken about indeed has dawned? Because Africa requires that all of us must put shoulder to wheel. We must commit ourselves to making this continent a successful continent. As we have always said, God bless Africa, Nkosi sikelele Africa, as it goes on its path of development and rising as a great continent. I thank you.
Halala, Africa, halala. Halala, Africa, halala. Thank you very much to our two first citizens of the province and of the country for sharing the.
And just coming out of that African Renaissance conference currently taking place in Durban, we heard the word from President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, addressing and giving a lecture there this morning, touching on issues of land as well as development, and also citing that, if Madiba was here, he would want peace and unity and dialogue to be taking place, specifically in the KZN, with those political killings that have been taking place in and around the province. We now cross live to the post-cabinet meeting. The Minister of Communications is currently briefing the media.
Mr. Bongisiwe Mpondo, Ms. Hlengiwe Thandeka Makhathini, Dr. Thabi Leoka, Mr. Ahmed Ismail Bassa, Mr. Trevor Abrahams, who's been reappointed, and the non-executive directors to the Transnet Board, Mr. Popo Mulife, as the chair, Ms. Mpho Emily Litlape, Mr. Louis Leon von Zehner, Ms. Eshla Nobulali Fikelepi, Ms. Dimakatso Catherine Matsucha, Ms. Ramasela Joyce Ganda, Professor Edward Christian Kisvete, Mr. Aluani Pesi Ramabulana, Dr. Folisani Signi Mufamadi, Ms. Vivian McMenamin, Advocate Opa Motaung, and Ms. Gratitude Ramapaka. This is all that Cabinet reflected on yesterday, and that brings us to the end of the briefing.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think at this point we'll take questions. Pretoria.
We are not journalists from the other side.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thabo. Bulela.
Thank you. Minister, my name is Thabo Mukoni. I work for the Sunday Times. On the Northwest, you indicate that the IMC has been expanded. Can you just elaborate on the rationale behind the expansion of the IMC? To what extent is the situation dire in the Northwest? And the IMC report, I don't recall it being released to the public. Yes, there was a briefing, I think, last week, but the full report, can it be availed to us as the press? Thanks.
Bulelan, you're the next.
Hi, Minister. My name is Bulelani from SABC. I'm just trying to get to the practicalities of the Premier's office being one of the departments that is under the full administration. Now, In that event, following the resignation of Mr. Mahuma Bello, who do you appoint? You appoint a provincial person to run the department, or is it going to be a national person? I'm just trying to get a clarity on who's going to run that thing, given that it's under the full administration.
Just a second on that IMCU report. We don't have it, so we don't. Oh, sorry, I apologize, Minister. My name's Hajra Marji. I work for Power 987. On the IMCU report on the Northwest, there was a press conference, but we never got the report. The President went further yesterday to say that various municipalities in the province are at the brink of collapse. So just the detail in that regard, we are unclear about. And then secondly, to ask you to take this hat off and put your other hat on, will the discussion around who should replace Mahuma Bello, is that urgent enough, and should we expect an outcome by Monday next week, given that there's a NEC?
Hi, Minister. Babalo Ndenze from Eyewitness News. Just on the Criminal Procedure Amendment Bill, just clarity, Minister, these amendments or changes to the Procedure Act, sexual offences going before courts after 2 decades, were these informed by these recent cases that we've seen in the media of people being sexually assaulted 2 decades ago, and has that movement of bringing these cases to the fore, even after 10 years, for example, did that inform this decision? Thank you.
Hi, Minister Wendell from Reuters. Just on page 6, the convention, the amendment to the Convention on the Physical Protection of Nuclear Material. Could you just tell us a little bit about what that entails? Are we looking at investing in physical infrastructure? My understanding is that most of the uranium and stuff is stored at Pelindaba. About 4 years ago, there was a break-in at Pelindaba. The security or lack of security at Pelindaba has been raised as a concern. I think, among others, by the IAEA. So I just want to find out a little bit more. Is this an investment in a new physical structure? Where is that structure going to be? Are you upgrading Pelindaba, etc., etc., etc.?
Good morning, Minister. My name is Joseph Musia from SABC. On the State Liability Amendment Bill, what is the rationale there? Are you, as Cabinet, saying South Africans who have been wronged by state hospitals are going to now receive reduced? Their claims are not gonna be reduced, or what's the issue here?
Thanks, Minister. Gay Davis, Eyewitness News. This new legislation, I mean, the approval of these bills is all very well, but the deadline for bills to arrive at Parliament, if they're to be processed before the end of this Parliament, was 30th of May. So presumably none of these bills are going to actually make that deadline, so they're not going to be processed until the new Parliament after the general elections next year. Your comment on that, because it seems to have taken an inordinate length of time for these bills to actually get here. And then the other question is on Israel. Surely Cabinet would have discussed the implications of downgrading the embassy in Tel Aviv. What was the discussion around that? Because I can't imagine that there would have been a discussion on Israel in Cabinet without that being reflected on, particularly given the extent of trade between South Africa and Israel as it stands. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for the questions. I'll try and take all the Northwest issues together. The party, the ANC, will consider 3 names, and those names will then be considered by the National Executive Committee, and that would be what the ANC will be looking at this coming weekend. And I'm sure we've had because I don't want to blur the lines between ourselves and the party. Yesterday's media brief that is already something that is being processed by the organization. And it then responds to the very issue that you have asked about who appoints. The ANC will appoint the Premier, and we hope and believe that the ANC will appreciate the agency, and hence it will have to take advantage of its own meetings that are taking place this weekend. The expansion of the IMC, part of the reasons on the expansion of the IMC have to do with frontline service delivery. That in the course of interacting with the communities in the Northwest and the stakeholders, including government itself, there are issues that have actually emerged. For example, around housing, for example, around Sun City, and many other allegations that have been put. And all those allegations do require that there must be capacity that will be brought in coming from the relevant departments in government. And that is the rationale. We know that there are issues around the scholar transport. Yes, it may be located in the Department of Transport, but its impact on the Department of Basic Education and attendance and all those things, you definitely need to look at those kind of areas and see how best we can deal with it. The release of the report. The report is a form of work in progress. Secondly, the report has got allegations which some have not been tested, and hence work is continuing to happen. And it is on those bases that there will be continuous briefings. A report on the Northwest will be an exit report that then says, this is what happened, this is what we found, and this is what we have done. But for now, there will be these continuous updates, because what you have and what Cabinet has reflected on, it was based on the information that requires government to continue again doing further work. So there can't be tidbits and release of information that may have not been tested, and hence the reinforcement and the increase on the capacity with regard to the Northwest. There's also been an agreement in Cabinet that we have to also be sensitive such that we do not go out and brief everybody and leave the communities of the Northwest behind. They become a relevant body in this process, so that then they themselves can appreciate, can contribute, and most importantly, can realize that there is a lot of objectivity in the interventions that national government is actually doing, including, Hajra, what you were raising about the state of local government, which is something that primarily has to do with service delivery, and hence the need, therefore, to step in and deal with those municipalities beyond even what has been released by the AG, but more looking at the impact of the challenges on ordinary South Africans, which is what Cabinet also raised to say, having this kind of an IMTT, we must not just be all focused on the government of the Northwest and not appreciate the impact of both the challenges but also our interventions on the people of the Northwest. So that's why then you will not have a report every day, because there is no report that is conclusive yet. There is a report that says we need to remove this cap from here and let's bring in somebody to come in and deal with it. We need to act on A and B. let's deal with those issues. We need to get more information from other affected people. Let's also encourage that. So it is an ongoing kind of an exercise. I remember also, even with the intervention of government in Limpopo, there was no report 2 weeks after the intervention. In fact, there was a close-out report led by the Department of Treasury, briefing the nation on what has been done after Limpopo was put there. So we will continue to update on developments and progress. A situational report will only be a report that helps us through the IMTT to make meaningful interventions. On the issues that have been raised around the amendment of the Criminal Procedure Act, in fact, it is not the current incidents. These incidents happened at a time when we were now responding and even borrowing from what has happened about more than 5-6 years ago, the Johannesburg South, the Gauteng South court judgment that exposed the gap in terms of our own laws, that we definitely have to deal with it. What it seeks to do is to also help the vulnerable who can't now, when they're abused, be in a position to speak for themselves, but upon them being independent and of age, can go out and say, my father raped me, or my neighbor raped me, or this happened, because at that time, even an adult, sometimes it may take you time before you break the silence, understanding where we're coming from as a nation. So it is that intervention, and it will then help the current developments, because now there will be a basis in terms of the law to prosecute for such crimes. And the thing around the handling of nuclear material, yes, it will require, even in the discussions in cabinet and cabinet committees, the issues were not just about investing in physical infrastructure. It was also about using advanced methods, use of advanced methods rather than obsolete kind of solutions that were there in Pelindaba, and hence it was easy to break in and all those things. And adaptation as well to new technology, training and skill and reskilling of our human resource, including the disposal methods, how you handle them. So it is much more inclusive. In actual fact, it takes us to a much more advanced level of handling things, given even the history of Pelindaba, how old it has been, and all those things, and the fact that there will be a continuous presence of nuclear material for medical purposes, for research, and therefore we need to also advance, because the sensitivity is centered around what the old legislation, how the act was actually framed. And now the call is for us to now make sure that we invest and we allow space for restructuring, reorganization, reskilling, and better investment on new technologies. The state, the issues around state liability, we know. I think the best teacher is what has happened with the road accident fund. But also with what is happening, there will forever be that compensation. There will forever be that compensation. What this seeks to do is to make sure that the consequences and issues of liability must be to the benefit of the victim, the patient. Secondly, it must come in different packages and not in just one form. There may be interventions that may say, you shall now get medication to help you recover rather than just financial compensation. And secondly, you shall be assisted to be taken to a particular level so that then your health can actually be improved, other than just financial compensation and it being seen as a one-size-fits-all kind of a solution where monies are actually disposed, but not necessarily to the betterment of the patient's health. So it is that we're seeking to do. The deadline on the bills, these are the bills that in the time frames of Parliament, they've been put as those that were in the pipeline. So they are already in the pipeline. They will then fit into the parliamentary program. I know that there's already 17 that are in the NCOP, and these ones were already highlighted as those that are in the between Parliament and Cabinet. And once we have done this, they then get ticked in because already they are in the programming of this term of office. So they will not miss this term of office. They are already tagged for that particular, for this particular term, unless the delays would be on the consultations and the interest that come and the concerns that will come through public participation in the parliamentary processes or Parliament itself. On Israel, we support, Cabinet agrees with the Minister of International Relations, and of importance, the discussions are going far beyond just the downgrading. It's also about economic relations, not only with regard to what is of benefit today at the expense of the lives of the people of Palestine. So it is a package that is all-inclusive, that includes also the lives of the people of Palestine and a permanent solution in Palestine. And amongst other things, that downgrading, Minister Sisulu will be briefing Parliament in the next sitting on other measures that South Africa must consider, but also on how we are going to do our bit in the United Nations and with the international community, not just on the side of solidarity, but also on the serious interventions that we believe have to be taken to bring peace and stability and realization of the two states in terms of Palestine and Israel. And also the thing that is quite important to register is that we really mean it. We mean it because we've had a life experience of living under the same conditions. And downgrading of an embassy against saving lives, we need to say what is the best that we can sacrifice.
Thank you very much, Minister. I think we've come to the end of the briefing. Thabo?
Northwest.
In your reply, Minister, you mentioned Sun City. I don't know. What's the issue there? I don't understand. I mean, Sun City is, it's...
The reason why, and I know why you're asking, the reason why I was citing it is that as the team is working there, things emerge. And this is one thing that is before the team, and the team has to go and look at it, the same as the selling of the game farms and all those kind of things. Anything that has been disposed which could have been in the best interest of the state and being an asset of the state.
I think you'll be the last one.
Also on Northwest, I just want to know...
Oh. No. You
why?
Go and Babalo will come after.
Why were the 10 provincial departments placed under administration under different sections of the Constitution? And so in other words, what is the difference between the two? Thanks.
Yes, in fact, it's a rider on Filder's question specifically on the office of the Premier. What is the issue in that specific?
Oh, there's another hand at the
It's also linked to that one, Minister. The Premier Department is the one that the national government is taking full administration. I understand that the ANC will have the 3 names and appoint that person, but in practical terms, would you agree with me to say that he will probably become a lame duck premier, given that if we are putting it under full administration, then there should be an administrator from national. And that's why I was asking Ayla, can you just give us a sense of, also given the sense that we don't know how long you're going to be placing this department under administration. Next year there's election, so what is it going to do?
Yes. When a department or sphere of government is put under administration, there is nowhere where it says you shall dissolve the provincial executive, which is the provincial cabinet. And there will be issues that the team that has gone there to intervene have to regularize matters with the political establishment there. And that's what has happened even with the Limpopo experience. So it would not be necessarily a lame duck, because what it means is that there shall be provincial executive council meetings where the administrator, which would be the teams in the Northwest that have come to intervene, will have to come and regularize there for purposes of accountability, compliance with the Constitution, and good governance, where there must be a formal space of accounting and a formal space of authorization. So that's what will happen. Secondly, the issues around the office of the Premier have to do with some of the responsibilities that were taken away from departments and were then put under the office of the Premier, which are now going to be attended to because they are located in the office of the Premier. So those are some of the things like your project management responsibility and many other things that the IMTT can actually share on the specificities of what exactly is within the office of the Premier. So remember, there were those responsibilities that were taken from different departments and were put under the administration of the office of the Premier. So yes, there shall be a Premier. It will be a political process. It will not necessarily be a lame duck. In fact, it would be about making sure that there's political authority finally, because Dr. Dlamini Zuma will not be a pseudo-premier there, nor Dr. Mkhize, nor Mr. Nene, the minister. You do need a political establishment that must continue to function. Secondly, the difference. The difference is that those that are going to be under Section 101B, is it 1B, where you take part of the authority, and those that are under 1A. What it means is that, one, there will be full investigation and total administration under the intervention team, particularly on the ones that we have mentioned, the four departments that are in the provincial government of the Northwest, which are the Department of Community Safety, the Department of Basic Education, Health and Public Works, and then the Office of the Premier. There it actually means there will be full takeover of the administration and the running of those departments and the office. And then on the other five, it would mean the intervention team will still work with those that are in the establishment there and give them the support, the advice, and most importantly, guide them on how to reposition those departments. And should there be any other thing, even with those ones, that would actually be attended to as and when it arises. On the first four and the Office of the Premier, it would be about taking over the full administration of those departments.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. I think we've come to the end of the briefing. Thanks, colleagues, for coming. Till 2 weeks from now.
Yes, please, honorable members of the media, see you at 2 when the president replies.
And just coming out there of that media briefing that has just been handed down by Nomvula Mokonyane on the state of affairs of what's been discussed in the cabinet, of course, talking on the issue of jobs as well as some other announcements that will be coming up in the next couple of days. Also mentioning some of the board changes that Pravin Gordhan had announced this morning with regards to SOEs. We take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. When we come back, we have a look at some of your headlines.
If you ask this pretentious mixologist what is needed to make the ultimate cocktail, she'd say a thorough knowledge of science. Ooh, right in the face. Yes. If you asked us, we'd say it's less about science and more about, well, chemistry.
Get 2 bottles of Sedgwick's The Original Old Brown for only 62 Rand. From Tops at Spar.
She's a former Member of Parliament, a cabinet minister, and South Africa's first female deputy president. She's currently serving her second term as Under Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, and will deliver the 9th annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on May 25th.
This opportunity will enable me to tell South Africans about the important role we can play in the divided Security Council, to bring the issues of women to the center, because the Security Council is responsible for peace and security. And we know that women are disproportionately affected by conflicts that are ranging around the world. But also, this is a multipolar world in which trade is under threat, and we need to make sure that we raise the issues that will benefit women's economic advancement.
The Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on Women Development for Africa's Renewal with Dr. Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka, May 25th, with live coverage via Channel 404 beginning at 6 p.m. Central African Time, only on SABC News.
Welcome back and having a look at some of your top stories. Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan has announced the appointment of Pakamani Hadebe as the new Eskom CEO. Hadebe is the Power Utilities' former acting CEO. Meanwhile, Minister Gordhan has made changes to boards of other state-owned enterprises. He says that he expects the boards to promote an ethical culture and to be more transparent.
They must investigate any allegations of corruption and ensure that where there's evidence of malfeasance, they deal with that evidence decisively. And where necessary, charges must be laid against individuals or entities that have benefited improperly from dubious procurement contracts with the Hawks and other sections of the police. Secondly, we expect that the prosecution authority will send out a positive and strong signal that they will act when there is the right amount of evidence prepared against individuals and entities that have been involved in malfeasance. But thirdly, the boards will also be asked to ensure that where funds are known to have left that particular entity, that those funds must be tracked down and brought back home. So recovering monies that have been lost is going to be an important function of these boards.
Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa delivered the keynote speech at the Nelson Mandela Africa Day centenary celebrations in Durban a short while ago. He paid tribute to the leaders of both South Africa and the continent at large for their progressive roles and selfless service in their pursuance of unity and peace and a better life for all. He also spoke passionately on the realization of Madiba's dreams.
The realization of Madiba's dream rests on leaders from all sectors of our society, leaders in government, business, labor, community, civil society, and large and across the continent. This dream that Madiba had, a dream of unity, was not only for Africa, but it was also for our own country. It was also a dream for our own very province here. If Madiba were alive today, he would say, I dream of the realization of unity of our people here in KZN. He would have spoken very vocally and loudly and said some of the expressions of either disagreement that manifest themselves in the killing of other people that we disagree with must come to an end. Madiba would have said unity should be underpinned by dialogue. Unity should be underpinned by consensus building, and that rather than resort to means where we kill each other, we should rather be sitting down and having discussions to build this unity that we also so need here in KZN. Madiba would have said the killings of one another must come to an end. And so I say here today, the killings that have been taking place in this province must come to an end. It is indeed when we find a way of sitting down and discussing what makes us differ that we are able to find peace, that we are able to find a way in which we can develop our province and indeed our country. That is what was Madiba's dream. We are also guided by the central guiding vision crafted by our continent dubbed Agenda 2063, which is the AU vision of an integrated, prosperous and peaceful Africa, driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in international arena. This is a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the next 50 years. It builds on and seeks to accelerate the implementation of past and existing continental initiatives for the growth and sustainable development of our continent.
Well, Minister of Communications, Nomvula Mokonyane, spoke on the Northwest debacle, stating that Cabinet received the Interministerial Committee report and that Cabinet is impressed with the progress in stabilizing the province. Mokonyane was speaking earlier at the post-Cabinet briefing.
On the Northwest, Cabinet received a second report from the Interministerial Committee on the Northwest, and we are satisfied with the progress in stabilizing the Northwest. In its previous meeting, Cabinet approved that Northwest Province be placed under Section 101 of the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa of 1996. Cabinet also increased the members of the IMC with the inclusion of the Ministers of Basic Education, Public Service and Administration, Human Settlement, Social Development, Tourism, Environmental Affairs, as well as Transport. The MC was asked to do further work in the province and advise Cabinet on which of the provincial departments should be placed under Section 1A or Section 101B of the Constitution. As a result of this work, Cabinet has approved that 5 of the provincial departments should be placed under Section 101B. And these are the following: the Office of the Premier, the Department of Community Safety and Transport Management, the Department of Basic Education and Sports Development, the Department of Health, and the Department of Public Works and Roads. 5 departments are to be placed under Section 101A, and the following are the departments: the Department of Finance, Economy and Enterprise Development, the Department of Local Government and Human Settlement, the Department of Rural Environment and Agricultural Development, the Department of Social Development, and the Department of Tourism. Cabinet approved that the necessary correspondence be sent to the National Council of Provinces and that communication with the relevant stakeholders in the Northwest should take place. The investigative work of the Justice, Crime Prevention and Security Cluster will continue on all matters that require the law enforcement agencies to intervene.
In breaking news coming in this hour, the KwaZulu-Natal Political Violence Task Team led by the Hawks have foiled an alleged assassination plot against a senior office bearer in Dundee. The Hawks have arrested a mayor, a councillor and a suspected hitman. They are accused of planning the assassination of a senior office bearer in Dundee in KwaZulu-Natal. In an early morning raid, the task team arrested a mayor. They also detained a councillor in escort and a man suspected of being a hitman. It's believed that the mayor had allegedly conspired to murder his colleague in the municipality over awarding of tenders. Well, the suspects are expected to appear in court this morning. We will be giving you more details on that. In some other news, did you know that the new phenomenon of binge-watching TV series can wreak havoc on your immune system and your body's ability to fight off colds and flu? And apart from the lack of sleep, marathon viewing can also exacerbate mindless eating as well as unhealthy snacking, which is also bad for your waistline. Well, to talk more about this, we are now joined by Nicole Jennings, a spokesperson for Pharmacodynamics. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Nicole, essentially just tell us a bit more about this new phenomenon of binge watching and essentially how does it affect one's immune system?
Yes, certainly. So binge watching television series is becoming a growing phenomenon. And the main reason for that is, more and more of these platforms are available where we can live stream TV series, meaning people have access to an entire season of their favorite series. And the study showed that more than half of people that tend to binge watch television shows sit down and they watch up to 3 to 4 episodes in one sitting. So that's about 3 hours of sitting still with a lack of physical activity. And consider on top of that that most of us have office jobs where we spend on average 6 to 8 hours also sitting behind a desk. So, then adding inactivity to your relaxation time, it really is a situation where hardly any exercise takes place during the day. Not only does this impact negatively on the immune system, but it also increases one's risk for non-communicable diseases such as heart disease and diabetes.
Take us through how it can actually increase the risk of getting those diseases that you've just mentioned.
All right. So in the first instance, with just the immune system being impacted, this takes place by, number one, lack of physical activity. Then in the second place, research also shows that people that tend to watch shows that are very high in tension and very adventurous shows tend to overeat mindlessly. So the tension that they experience on screen will then physically manifest, and they do overeat, usually on junk food, because it's the most easy and convenient way to consume. And then there's also the issue of the light from the screen. The blue light can impact on your melatonin levels. That's a hormone that interacts with your sleep levels. And if adults don't have 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep, it can have a negative impact on the immune system as well. Then, of course, South Africans are also very guilty of what they call the big four. So that's overusing alcohol, overeating on junk food, lack of physical activity, and smoking tobacco products. And that lack of physical activity that comes with binge watching ties into that and is a major driver of heart disease and diabetes in our country.
Oh, that's very shocking, Nicole. Just take us through, if one already has somewhat of a weakened immune system, already struggles sleeping and has, some of those symptoms that you mentioned, how binge watching can actually change or worsen the conditions that they currently have.
Okay. Yes, the good news with the immune system is you can always turn it around if you're willing to make the necessary lifestyle changes. I just also want to say that up to 80% of heart disease in this country can be prevented through healthier lifestyle change. And it comes down to making simple day-to-day decisions. So as an example, if you do want to enjoy your favorite shows, why not load all of them onto an iPad and, watch your shows while you're running on a treadmill or while you're exercising on a stationary bicycle. That way, you're getting in your physical activity and you're leaving more time to sit down and spend time with family and loved ones, which is another fantastic way to relax. Another thing that you can consider doing is research, and you can download a blue light filter for these different devices because the blue light impacts on sleeping patterns. So the research showed that 98% of these people that binge watch struggle from insomnia, and they don't have their 7 to 9 hours of uninterrupted sleep in the evening. So it really is a major issue. And again, if you already have heart disease or if you already have diabetes, lifestyle management is the cornerstone of treating these conditions.
Yeah.
So just get active, go do your 30 minutes of exercise up to 3 times a week, and you can still enjoy your shows, but do so in moderation and maintain that healthy balance in your lifestyle.
Nicole, something that, my producers as well as some of the content editors and myself would like to know is, does this also apply for binge reading? I mean, in our jobs, it's something that we do. It's also something that we try to escape from. Would we, suffer some of the same conditions or side effects?
So with binge reading, and you mentioned specifically in our jobs that we binge read, there again, we are spending a lot of time looking at a screen, and we are spending a lot of time sitting still. So absolutely. It all boils down to, the complete physical inactivity that forms such a big part of day-to-day life. Sitting in traffic, then sitting at the office, and then getting home and sitting on the couch it's an extremely unhealthy lifestyle. It's not sustainable. I think, reading, if you're reading a book, at least then you don't have the blue light from the screen that's impacting. Something that's also, a growing phenomenon that more and more companies are starting to implement is sitting and walking and standing desks, which is a fantastic way to combat physical inactivity and to make sure that you're still, keeping your blood flowing and making sure that your body stays healthy while you take care of all your responsibilities in your professional capacity.
All right. And, apart from that, going back to binge watching, what then sort of mechanisms are being proposed, to be able to catch up on, some of our favorite series if we are working 6 or 7 days a week?
Yes. Look, it really does boil down to moderation. I think it's important for parents to have rules in the household to make sure that children learn from a young age how to enjoy their favorite series and even their reading in moderation. Video games and television games, that's another area where we see people are starting to increase the amount of time they spend engaging in these activities. So very important there for parents to start putting certain rules in place. Just make sure that the screen time is limited to a minimum of, say, an hour and a half a day, especially if your child is already spending time, watching screens at school or whatever the case may be. And always make time for physical activity. Why play a video game where you're playing soccer online? You can go outside and you can run around, get your blood moving and stay healthy in that way. And I'd also recommend, from a diet perspective, always prepare a wide variety of different fruit and vegetable and healthy snacks so that when the family sits down to enjoy a TV show, there are healthy alternatives to snack on and you don't tend to go for the junk food, which is also detrimental to our health in the long run.
Definitely very interesting, specifically with the winter coming up. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Nicole Jennings, spokesperson for Pharma Dynamics, talking to us a bit more about the dangers of binge-watching television as well as reading. And I think we're all somewhat guilty of that. We'll take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. Please stay tuned.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Well, 3 people with Ebola have fled a hospital in Democratic Republic of Congo have died. Ethiopians living in South Africa are asking for protection after their leader was reportedly assassinated. Having a look at your lead story at the half hour with African News, 3 people with Ebola who had fled a hospital in the Democratic Republic of Congo have died. Doctors Without Borders say 2 died after returning home, while the 3rd died in hospital after being returned for treatment. They say the patients voluntarily left the isolation unit at the Wangata Hospital in Madaka. Earlier this month, the DRC announced that there had been cases of Ebola in a remote northwestern district called Bikoro.
According to Doctors Without Borders, 2 patients left the hospital on Monday, May the 21st, before being located the following day. The World Health Organization's representative in Congo said 1 was found dead and another was sent back to hospital and died shortly afterwards. Another patient left on Sunday, May the 19th, but was found alive the same day and is under observation. An Ebola awareness community group has been set up in the city to educate locals about how the disease is transmitted.
C'est très important que les familles des malades.
It is very important that the family members of the patient understand the risk of spreading the disease.
when they keep the sick at home. If people understand that there will be less chance that they want to escape. It is a hospital, not a prison. We cannot lock everything up.
Si tu es compris par les familles, il y a moins risque que les gens veulent évader.
Health officials are especially concerned by the diseases present in Bandaka, a crowded trading hub upstream from Kinshasa, a city of about 10 million people. The river runs along the border with the Republic of Congo. The outbreak, first spotted near the town of Bikoro, south of the city, is believed to have killed at least 27 people so far. More than 11,300 people have died in an Ebola outbreak in the West African countries of Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone between 2013 and 2016.
Ethiopians living in South Africa have marched to their embassy in Pretoria demanding justice for the assassinated Liza Gerazan Nebro. Nebro was shot and killed in Johannesburg last month by an unknown man. The group also called for more protection from the South African government, claiming that Ethiopians are targeted daily by hitmen allegedly sent by the Ethiopian government.
Ethiopians seeking justice, the group took to the streets demanding speedy investigations into Nebro's murder, linking his assassination to operatives of the Ethiopian regime and embassy staff. They claim that Nebro isn't the first Ethiopian assassinated in South Africa.
It's becoming a catastrophic, and every political migrant is in a sad situation now. So we need a protection from South African government. We need a justice and a proper investigation, and the culprit must be arrested and behind bar.
The African Diaspora Forum marched in solidarity with the unhappy Ethiopians.
We came here to point our finger to the embassy, and this embassy should be investigated and bring them out as culprits.
The group had hoped to deliver the memorandum of grievances and demands to the embassy, but it closed for the day.
We are very sad. We are citizens of Ethiopians. So whatever they do, they have to receive and see and our message, and they have to respond on that. So we are very sad. We know that we have no government. We are stateless people.
The Ethiopians expressed unhappiness with the embassy having shut its doors, calling it disrespectful. They say they feel rejected and describe the embassy as a white elephant that's failing its people. Patricia Fasahi, SABC News in Pretoria.
In Kenya, this Friday, Africans from all walks of life will mark Africa Day, a day set aside to remember the 1963 founding of the Organization of African Unity, now known as the African Union. Africa Day also provides the continent's people an opportunity to acknowledge their achievements and what remains to be done to achieve the dreams of Africa's founding fathers, those of independent states united in other diversities. Well, ahead of Friday celebrations, our reporter Sarah Kamani went out onto the streets of Nairobi to know whether Kenyans are proud to be Africans. Or does the continent have anything to celebrate on this day? Let's have a look.
As a continent, no. We are in a pathetic state. 50 years after independence, I sometimes ask myself, should the colonialists have stayed around? Because in as much as we claim to be independent, we still have to go back to them for aid. Meaning, we are still colonized in everything but name. Without them, would these countries be functioning? I ask myself.
Africa as general, we have a challenge, especially when it comes to food production. So we find that, okay, there's a lot of food being produced, but we can't feed the whole Africans.
If we continue with the Pan-Africanism spirit that was there, what was shared by the late Kwame Nkrumah, the likes of Jomo Kenyatta and the late Mandela, then we can still go ahead as long as we put our acts together, we rein in corruption, and we'll be able to do it.
I celebrate the vibrance of African people and the positive in the spirit. And I also celebrate the interest of our leaders to unite, especially for the East African region, the East African community.
Well, that's a wrap-up of news, at least for now. Ben and Kirtley is standing by with all your sporting highlights. So first, though, we'll take a short break. Welcome back to Newsroom. Thanks for staying with the show. Let's bring you your sports news now. AB de Villiers has been described as freakish, the greatest of all time, and an entertainer after he announced his retirement from international cricket. International Cricket Council Chief Executive David Richardson said de Villiers was one of cricket's great entertainers and a genuinely special and instinctive player. Former player, now coach Mark Boucher described him as an inspiration, while players JP Durmani and top-ranked test bowler Kagiso Rabada said he was the greatest of all time. Indian cricket legend Sachin Tendulkar said he will be missed. Joe Root of England also said that AB de Villiers was a freak considering his cricketing skills. On the day, news broke that de Villiers was the only South African on the ESPN World Fame 100 list. The 34-year-old announced on social media he was retiring after 114 test matches, 228 one-day internationals and 78 T20 matches for the Proteas.
The former captain made a total of 8,765 test runs for the Proteas and has a batting average of over 50 in both test and one-day international cricket. De Villiers' 22nd and final test century was scored against Australia in March.
It is time for others to take over. I've had my turn, and to be honest, I'm tired. This is a tough decision. I thought long and hard about it, and I'd like to retire while still playing decent cricket. And after the fantastic series wins against India and Australia, now feels the right time to step aside.
In his 14-year international career, de Villiers has had outstanding performances. Among those that stood out was his record for the fastest ODI half-century and the fastest ODI century against the West Indies at the Wanderers.
Hello! It's 6 more again, and AB de Villiers is the new record owner of the fastest 100 in the world of cricket in one-day international cricket.
He also holds the record for the fastest test century by a South African, making 100 from 75 balls against India in 2011.
It would not be right for me to pick and choose where and when and in what format I play for the Proteas. For me, in green and gold, it must be everything or nothing.
De Villiers will continue to play domestic cricket for the Titans.
I have no plans to play overseas. In fact, I hope I can continue to be available for the Titans in domestic cricket, and I will remain the biggest supporter of Faf du Plessis and the Proteas.
SABC News.
Staying with cricket news, skipper Dinesh Karthik and Andre Russell helped the Kolkata Knight Riders knock the Rajasthan Royals out of this cricket season's Indian Premier League with a 25-run win in the eliminator. Karthik, who made 52, and Russell, who smashed 49 not out, helped the Knight Riders to 169 for 7, a total that their bowlers defended by restricting the Royals to 144 for 4 at Kolkata's Eden Gardens. The Knight Riders will face the Sunrisers Hyderabad tomorrow for a chance to make the final.
Too short, and it goes. What an over! It's gone behind the stumps, and it's gone a long way behind the stumps.
There's the new batsman in, Dre Ross is still there.
Another tremendous hit. Oh, it's another one. It is a tennis shot from Andre Russell.
Ball drives them in quickly.
Oh, another cotton ball. Yes. From the toe end is another cotton ball. That man, Kuldeep Yadav, strikes yet again.
This one might be out. Should be taken. Who's under it? Chivon Searles takes the catch. Slower ball and out. What a brilliant over. Yeah, that'll do it. He'll pick up a boundary to finish the game off.
Moving on to football now. National football teams from around the world are finalising their preparations before departing to Russia for next month's FIFA World Cup. Pre-tournament favourites, including Brazil and Germany, have convened at their respective training camps. The event kicks off in Moscow on the 14th of June with hosts Russia taking on Saudi Arabia.
Brazil have had its fair share of ups and downs over the past 5 years, from winning the 2013 Confederations Cup to early exits at the Copa America in 2015 and 2016. But Brazilian fans have reason to smile. Star forward Neymar is on track for the World Cup after a foot injury, and coach Tite, who took over in 2016, has done wonders with the team. Despite taking his time to put the team together, Brazil fans believe in his abilities.
We miss 2 months and a half, 3 months for the World Cup. Tite still has the set up the team. You know. This is very difficult because it's difficult to organize, but I trust him. I think he's gonna be good and gonna make a nice work to Brazil, at least to come in the final.
Brazil joined Switzerland, Costa Rica and Serbia in Group E. Argentina continued training for the World Cup after goalkeeper Sergio Romero was cut from the team with a knee injury. Romero's exclusion is a major blow for a side that's been struggling defensively, losing 4-2 to Nigeria and 6-1 to Spain in recent friendlies. They do, however, have superstar Lionel Messi in their midst. His mere presence on the field is bound to be a huge inspiration for his teammates. Argentina were drawn with Iceland, Croatia and Nigeria in Group D. The French convened for the first time ahead of the World Cup as coach Didier Deschamps called on them to stay humble. France last won the World Cup in 1998 with Deschamps as captain. 20 years later, Kylian Mbappe, Ousmane Dembélé and Antoine Griezmann will spearhead a dangerous attack. France will face Australia, Peru and Denmark in Group C.
Yes, some may think we have an easy draw, but then there is reality. I will say it again. Ours is the only group with 3 teams out of the top 12 on the FIFA rankings. Our first match will therefore be very important. Our goal is to qualify for the last 16 and then we'll take it from there.
And the German squad arrived at their training camp in northern Italy, much to the delight of waiting fans. Recently recovered star goalkeeper Manuel Neuer and 18 other players were in a bus accompanied by high security. The remaining players will join them at the end of the week. Germany will take on Sweden, South Korea and Mexico in Group F. Liesel Sankel, SABC News.
And mountaineer Sibusiso Vilani says his record of 8,000 meters above sea level, or what's known as the dead zone on the world's highest peak, Mount Everest, is still a record for Africa. Vilani set out on an attempt for an oxygenless summit, but was not able to push on as it would have placed him at huge risk. Vilani started his expedition a month ago.
Vilani summited Everest twice. He raised the bar this time, trying it without supplementary oxygen. But extreme weather conditions played havoc with his plans. On Tuesday, the writing was on the wall. Vilani has started his descent and is already looking forward to the next challenge. But he says his achievement is still a first for Africa.
Attempt ended up at Camp 4, 8,000 meters without oxygen. I slept over there at 8,000 meters without oxygen, which to me means that this is an African record, history made. I am the first African to have reached that height without oxygen and been able to sleep there or spend a night there without oxygen. So that is quite amazing for me.
fewer than 200 people have managed to conquer Everest without oxygen. 7 summits conqueror, Villani's determination and courage have earned him accolades and respect. He was the first African to summit Everest in 2003 and repeated the feat 2 years later. In July, Villani will again lead the Trek for Mandela team up Kilimanjaro, this to raise funds for sanitary wear for needy schoolgirls. Gillian Pillay, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And to conclude our focus on sports here on Newsroom for today, let's recap our sports question that we asked on social media. What do you make of AB de Villiers retiring from international cricket? We asked you at SABC Newsroom. Here's a couple of comments that came through from some of our viewers. Charlie Chokwe says, honestly, it's for AB to make a call, but was disappointed to retire like that out of the blue as if he suffered a serious injury that will take him years to recover. Nah, no send-off by the fans. I think so many people wanted that, just an opportunity to say thank you so much for the servant that he's been to South African cricket. Grant Stanley says a good move. It's his decision to make, and applaud him for stepping down in order to make room for the younger guns. I did see a comment from AB saying that he wanted to retire while he was still at the very top of his game. Bonani Kobo says, I was disappointed. I don't accept it all. He should have retired after the World Cup. Anyway, nothing we can do. We wish him all the best in the future. Thanks, Tinkler, for your comments. And Nazim Grootboom says, it's a loss to the cricket nation. I think AB took a wrong decision. Hashtag AB retires. Thank you so much to those viewers that did get involved in our sports question for today. That's how we conclude your sport, and actually how we come to the end of a Newsroom for this Thursday. From myself, Valen Kirtley, and the rest of the Newsroom team, we leave you with the National House of Traditional Leaders. They're currently addressing the media, responding to former President Kgalema Motlanthe on communal land issues over the weekend.
To his speeches delivered when he was the president during the opening of the National House of Traditional Leaders. You can check on the speech that he delivered in February 2009 to traditional leaders. Traditional leaders and their communities have lived together since time immemorial. There has never been a traditional leader that is, that is separate from their own communities. Communal land is held in trust by traditional leaders in council on behalf of their communities. People in rural areas love their traditional leaders and their communal way of life, which has survived them over decades and the past 7 different regimes. We are therefore asking Mr. Motlanthe, what have rural people of South Africa done to you to deserve this treatment, especially traditional leaders? What we have deduced as Amakos is that the ruling party may be afraid to tackle the 87% of the land in white or private ownership, and is tactically shifting the blame to traditional leaders and their communities, and therefore deem it fit to encroach on the already transformed and congested 13% of the land where black people reside and survive, of which those people that are residing there were people that were allocated those sites by traditional leaders, and we've not heard of anyone that has been denied a piece of land in rural areas. Apart from that, it is well known fact that many traditional leaders and members of their respective communities fought and died for the liberation of South Africa. It is also an indisputable fact that communal land belongs to traditional communities, and the communal land is held in trust by traditional communities and by who are led by their traditional leaders. Therefore, any decision on land matters is taken in consultation with the members of the community through, amongst others, the legal structure called Traditional Council, 40% of which is constituted by the elected members of the community. The community Mbizos and engagement with municipalities and government departments also take place regularly to discuss issues of community development, service delivery, and other matters impacting on the lives of members of the community. The traditional leaders are working cordially with government departments on land matters. A classical example is the ongoing Agrarian Revolution program that is coordinated by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, where the Honorable President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, during his address to the National House, he said the traditional leaders must play a key role in resuscitating the economy by making sure that the agrarian revolution is a success. So what the minister is doing with traditional leaders is to put to practice what was raised by the president, which in this agrarian revolution includes other departments such as agriculture, rural development and land reform, small business development, water and sanitation, as well as organizations like the Agricultural Research Council, who will be the ones that are testing the soil in those rural areas, and the private sector. Traditional leaders are committed to ensuring the success of the program, and the amount of land being pledged for agrarian revolution currently far exceeds what was contemplated. In light of the reality on the ground, Mr. Motlante's utterances are devoid of any truths and constitute a propaganda aimed at agitating rural communities to turn against their own leadership system. The House has formally engaged the African National Congress through the Office of the Secretary General in an endeavor to seek clarity on Mr. Motlante's utterances and to get the ANC's official position on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson and colleagues. I'm afraid I forgot to indicate that the interview or the press conference is live on 404, SABC 404. My apologies. I think it's time to add, where possible, from the leadership, and from there we'll be expecting some questions from our colleagues. Thank you.
As our chairperson, Nkosi Mahlangu,